Hi, it's Gamish back at you with another short video. This time I'm going to show you my top 25 favorite albums of all time. And being a child of the late 60s and 70s, I've listened to a lot of music, a lot of different genres, from hard rock, heavy metal, disco, hair bands, alternative, new wave, blues rock. It just goes on and on and on. And in my collection, you won't find any country music, and you won't find any disco or opera. Although in my 56th year, I have come to appreciate some country, and I've come to really appreciate some of the early 70s music, such as from Dan Fogelberg, James Taylor, the Eagles, where they used a lot of slide guitar in their music, the Grateful Dead. And I always associated slide guitar with country music, which I despised. And in those days, country music was, there were songs about divorce, a guy cheating on his girlfriend. It was all the same stuff. And but I did like the slide guitar, and because of my appreciation for slide guitar and lap guitar, I enjoy country music a lot more now, maybe because I've just mellowed with age. And the same with some opera. I've always loved classical, but I don't have any classical pieces in my collection, although Wendy Carlos's Switched on Bach almost made it in here. I actually had it in this list before I bounced it against some other favorites. So that one's probably between 26 and 30. But anyway, let's get to the list. And some of these you will agree with, some of my selections, and probably a lot of them you won't. But this is a personal list of favorites. And so I'd like to encourage you to respond with your own video or a list in the comments to share your top 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 records, and maybe why they are your favorites. Since I grew up in the late 60s, starting to listen to the Beatles and the Eagles, the Rolling Stones, Pink Floyd, Aerosmith, and then Boston, Kansas, Foreigner. My background is with hard and soft rock, and with that background, with that backbone, if you will, the ribs that have grown out of it have splintered into different idioms. My favorite style of music today, after all these decades of listening to music and enjoying it and discovering new stuff, my favorite music today is blues rock. And my favorite guitarist is Robin Trower. And the reason for that is simply because he brings it all together for me. A lot of his soulful blues music and his rockers, they speak to me, and I get the most enjoyment and satisfaction out of his music. And he's in his early 70s, and he makes a lot of young people not look so good compared to what he's producing himself. Again, my own personal opinion, my humble opinion, and I apologize if anything I say is offensive. It's not intended to be that way. But there are some things I like, and there are some things I do not like. And we're not going to see it at every level when I show you my top 25 favorites. So I'm going to start. Number 25 is The Madcap Laughs by Syd Barrett. Syd Barrett was the former founder of Pink Floyd, and with his experimentation with drugs, and he had a delicate mind to begin with, but it was a bad mix for him, and he ended up losing his mind to a great extent, which is what Dark Side of the Moon is really all about. And David Gilmour helped produce two solo albums in the early 70s, this being his first one. And it's real honest music. No Good Trying, No Man's Land, Dark Globe, which is one of David Gilmour's favorites and one that he plays at his concerts even to this day. Okay, so that's my number 25. Number 24 is Neil Young's Harvest. And the first time I heard this was on a cassette tape at Christmas time in 1972. I was 11. My father had received some music, and this was one of them. And I borrowed it and listened to it as I went to sleep many, many, many nights. So I have fond memories of this one. Not to mention that it's just an incredibly well-produced, well-written album. Number 23 is Steely Dan's Katy Lied. And I love all of Steely Dan's music. Asia is another one of my huge favorites, Pretzel Logic. But there was something about Katy Lied that really struck a chord with me when I first heard it. And I was about 16 at the time. Dr. Wu, Black Friday. You know, these are just great tunes and a good album. Interesting cover work as well. Number 22 is Echo and the Bunnymen, Porcupine. And I like all of their albums. There's not a single album I do not like. I'm not crazy about some of Ian McCulloch's solo works, but of all the Echo and Bunnymen albums, this is my favorite. Very jarring music, deeply emotional, experimental. You know, when I first started listening to these guys, I was in my early 30s, and I've appreciated them ever since. '21. This is David Bowie, and this is his Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars album. And when I was working, I was doing a summer job and riding with a guy that had been a DJ at one point. He ended up becoming my uncle. But he gave me a list of albums. One was from Queen, as I recall. One was from The Who, and there was this one. And so I went to the record store, the Paperback Booksmith in Nashua, New Hampshire, and I bought it. And when I listened to it, every song spoke to me. There was not a bad song in this entire album. And to this day, I still have it. It's in good condition. Almost as good as the day I bought it, except for ring wear. Okay, so that's a favorite. Number 20 is Albert Collins' Frostbite. And I like a lot of Albert Collins' music. This one especially has a lot of great songs on it, and his Telecaster playing is superlative. Number 19, B.B. King, Indianola, Mississippi Seeds. And the first thing that struck me about this album, when I first heard it, I was about 14, was the artwork. Even before I heard any music from it, you know, it's got a watermelon that's shaped like a guitar on the front, and then at the back you've got a shredded watermelon, as though B.B. King had played it to death, you know. It was just very interesting to me. Hummingbird, Go Underground, Until I'm Dead and Cold, Ask Me No Questions. Just great songs, great songs. And Hummingbird, especially, if you listen to it, almost sounds like a train running through the song. It's just a great album. Number 18 is Rocks by Aerosmith. And I like all of Aerosmith's music. This was actually my second album that I ever purchased. The first one being Frampton Comes Alive. The third one being Animals by Pink Floyd. But the second album I ever purchased with my own money was this one, after it had just come out in '77. And it came out on the heels of the single Back in the Saddle. But there were other songs that I enjoyed more on this, such as A Lick and a Promise, Home Tonight, which really pulls at the heartstrings, Combination, Last Child, you know, a really great album. Has a lot of play on it, believe me. This is actually my third vinyl, having worn through the other ones. I think this is number 17, Talking Heads, 77. When this came out, the song that is referenced on this album is Psycho Killer. But at the time when I was working in a summer job, driving someplace, COZ in Boston at the time, Captain Ken Shelton was the DJ, was playing a parody of Psycho Killer called Psycho Chicken. And it was cool. It was that bum 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 bum. It was very quirky. And when I found out that the idea came from this album, I bought it. And every song was like completely new. A totally new way of writing music, playing music, singing music. These guys were never going to be, you know, rock gods, but they ended up becoming very popular in their day. But this was the first one that did it for me. And there are two others that I really enjoy. More songs about buildings and food and fear of music. But this, of all their output, this is my favorite one of theirs. As I got into the late 80s, I kind of lost interest because it became so commercialized, my opinion. But when they were raw and new and still playing at colleges, you know, for gigs, this one did it for me. Number 16, when I was in the Army, a friend of mine introduced me to art rock or progressive rock, such as music from Camel and Genesis, Yes, and this one from Todd Rundgren called Utopia. And it starts with a live track called Utopia, and then the rest of the album was produced in the studio. One of my favorite songs from this one is Freak Parade, and the words are on the back. And you know, Todd Rundgren is obviously, you know, a very talented, some call boy genius, when he hit the scene. But this particular album, I love it. For progressive rock, this is about as good as you can get. Number 15, and this was a hard choice because I like all of Genesis music, but this is my favorite of Genesis output, and this is called A Trick of the Tail. And again, the artwork is really cool. It just strikes me as something special. And this was without the lead singer, Peter Gabriel, who had left after The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. And so Phil Collins, who actually sounded a lot like Peter Gabriel in singing voice, became the lead singer, and this was, I believe, the second album that came out with him as the new lead singer. Number 14 is the Yardbirds, and this is Roger the Engineer. Known as Roger the Engineer, that's not really the name of the album. The name of the album is the Yardbirds, and what's nice about this album is it has all of the Yardbirds together one last time, and no hits that got any major airplay, but it's a very interesting album. A lot of fun stuff on it. Okay, I think I've lost count. Let's see where we are here. Okay, I think I'm on number 12. Number 12 is probably going to surprise you a little bit, because with all the albums these guys put out, they only have one real hit, Easy Living, which is on this album. But Uriah Heep's Demons and Wizards, not only does it have a cool cover by Roger Dean, but the Wizard, that song itself, The Rainbow Demon, All My Life, Poets, Justice, Easy Living, these are songs that really move along. This is one of their best albums, and I think maybe the peak album of their career, in my opinion. Number 11 is Rocker by Humble Pie, led by Steve Marriott, and Peter Frampton was his lead guitarist during this period. This is a live album, and it's noted for its live version of I Don't Need No Doctor, but it has a bunch of their other songs on here as well, such as Stone Cold Fever and Rolling Stone. So, double album, very, very loud, hard, good old rock. Not really rock and roll, although there's some of it in there, but just rock at its peak. So now we're at our top 10. Number 10, and again, a very popular band with many great albums. But this is my favorite, Fly By Night by Rush. This came out during the heyday of Led Zeppelin, and I think it came out 1974. And every song on here is fantastic. When I first heard the song By-Tor and the Snow Dog, I wasn't super crazy about Geddy Lee's voice. It was so high and shrill, but you get used to it. It almost has a Robert Plant nuance to it. But By-Tor and the Snow Dog is by far, I think, my favorite song of all music, hard rock music. And Anthem, Fly By Night, In the End, Rivendell. Just such great songs written by Neil Peart, who wrote all the words. And excellent guitar playing by Alex Lifeson, who is kind of underrated, I think. You just don't hear of him being as one of the top guitarists, but Jimmy Page had a lot of respect for him. And this album, my favorite from Rush. Number 9. I have all of Robin Trower's releases. Earlier I said how much I like him. And I'd like to have 3 or 4 of his albums in my top 25, but I didn't want to get so concentrated on one group or soloist. And Robin Trower, his Victims of the Fury, which came out in 1979 or 1980. Yeah, 1980. I was in the Army at the time, driving home from the hospital. I was a medic. And on the radio they played The Shout, which was like a 2-minute song. It was a very short song, but so powerful. In that 2 minutes, I couldn't believe how much power he got into it. And his guitar had almost an otherworldly, rusty kind of sound to it. So I turned around and went to the Harmony Hut down in, this would have been Petersburg, Virginia, and I bought it. Brought it home to my cheap record player and wore the needle right through to the other side. This is my 3rd copy of that album. And I also have it on CD. You can't get the CD anywhere. You might be able to find it used for like $50, but I got the CD as well. But the vinyl is far superior to the CD. It's warmer, a lot more depth to it, a lot more body. Number 8, Electric Light Orchestra's El Dorado. This is the only record that Jeff Lynne used an orchestra with that I'm aware of. And trying to remember what the hit was off this one. Oh, Can't Get It Out of My Head. It's an okay song, but it's the other songs like Mr. Kingdom and El Dorado and the finale that I really enjoy from this album. And this is actually my 2nd copy of it. Number 7, Pink Floyd's Animal, which I mentioned earlier, very briefly. Animals, 1977, when I was 16, I was in a study hall at school, and the girl that was sitting across from me was telling me that she was going to buy a couple of albums on her way home. One of them was Animals by Pink Floyd. And for some reason, I thought Pink Floyd was like a disco band or something. But the next time that I was at the paperback booksmith in Nashua, the Nashua Mall back then, I looked for it, and it didn't look like a disco album to me at all. In fact, I looked through the other albums, and they looked pretty cool, covers by Hypnosis. So I took a chance and bought it, and wow, was I glad I did. And completely blew my mind, and that was without being on drugs, recreational drugs at that time, which were very minor compared to what's out there today, believe me. But in any case, Animals by Pink Floyd, and I enjoy all of Pink Floyd's output, but this is my favorite of theirs. Number 6 is The Best of Cream, and this is distributed on IMHO Records. It's hard to find. It's been out of print for a very long time. Again, in my mid-teens, my uncle actually had this, and what really struck me about this album was Eric Clapton's wah-wah, his use of the wah-wah pedal. And at that time, the wah-wah was still, used in a lot of music, especially like getting close to the glitter band era, and especially in disco. The wah-wah was not an unusual effects pedal back then. There was a period of time where it went away and sounded dated, but it's back. I mean, they use wah-wah a lot nowadays. But back then, the wah-wah pedal was an incredible sound to me. Sonically, I really loved it. And so I found this on eBay about 2 years ago. Probably spent $10 on it. It's in near mint condition. I love this album. Okay, the next one, we're down to the top 5. This one here is number 5, Bob Dylan's John Wesley Harding. And I can't remember how I came into contact. I think it was one of my father's cassettes that he had on that Christmas back when I was 11 or 12. And very simple music. It was a guitar, a bass, and basically, you know, a snare drum. There might have been one tom-tom in a bass, but very simple music. What was so fantastic about it, especially to a kid at 11 or 12 with his imagination going out of control, that each song tells a story. You know, the wicked messenger, I pity the poor immigrant, I am a lonesome hobo, Dear Landlord, which was made a little more famous by Joe Cocker a couple of years later, The Ballad of Frankie Lee and Judas Priest. I mean, the names, the titles. I dreamed I saw St. Augustine. The Drifters' Escape. As I went out one morning. Each song on this album tells a story. And even to this day, I thoroughly enjoy it for its simplicity, both in songwriting and in the instrumentation. There's no other album by Bob Dylan that sounds like this. And so this is my number 5, my top 5. Set this aside for now. Number 4, when I was working another summer job, maybe 15 years old, I was installing floors in new homes, in living rooms, dining rooms, you know, the hardwood floors, and then plywood flooring in kitchens and bathrooms. It was hot, hot work. No air conditioning, nothing like that. Humid, hot summers. And I worked with a guy who loved ZZ Top. And at that time, he was playing their second and third albums. And one day, he was bringing me home. He was my ride. And he had the first album playing. And I really caught on to it. Brown Sugar, Old Man, Certified Blues, Just Got Back from Babies. That might be my number 2 favorite song of all time. Right under By Tor and the Snow Dog by Rush. Just Got Back from Babies. It's real blues. I mean, this album is steeped in blues rock. And is just 3 guys, as you know, ZZ Top, Gibson, Les Paul, Fender bass, and a decent drum set. And these 3 guys really make use of these instruments. And good songwriting, great playing, before they went totally commercial. But this is one of my favorite albums, number 4 to be exact. Number 3, this might surprise you a little bit, but I'm not a super fan of Moody Blues. There's really 3 albums that I like from them. One I like a lot, and that's Days of Future Past. And this is their second album. The first album was a bunch of crap, in my opinion, where they were trying to find their way. They were trying to be pop. They were singing other people's music. But it wasn't until Days of Future Past where Justin Hayward joined and gave them some decent songs and brought them up a huge notch. And at the time, that this album was made, they had their songs, and the manager, I think it was, used at that time the session musicians that played orchestra types of music to give themselves a temporary name. It was called the London Festival Orchestra, just for this album. And all these guys and girls got together and played some incidental music and some music in support of some of these songs. And then that music was stitched together between songs that the Moody Blues had already recorded. And it's a concept album. This is really, I think, probably the first or one of the first concept albums. This came out in 1967, which was a great year for music. You know, the Beatles, the Stones, the Small Faces, Jimi Hendrix, all had super huge albums at that time. So anyways, this is number 3. Number 2 is a hard to find album. It's which is kind of surprising, because when I read about this in all kinds of magazines, they're saying that this was really a masterpiece, not only for the band but for music during the late 60s. I think this came out in 68. And this is the Small Faces Ogden's Special Nut Gone Flake. And it is a concept album. When it first came out, the packaging consisted of a can, a round can, that had the artwork and the album. But what was happening was the cans were rolling off the shelves. So they got rid of the cans and came out with just a simple whiteboard album with that artwork and the record on the inside. And this was released by Immediate Records, which is a pink label, and hard to find, very hard to find, and very expensive if you can find a really good copy. I found a pristine copy. This is near mint minus, and paid a lot of money for it. But side 1 is just a bunch of songs, and then side 2 tells the story of Happiness Sam. And I won't go into it any more than that. You can check it out if you want. But number 2, it's one of my favorite albums of all time. I mean, I love this album. I love the music. I love the instrumentation and the words. I can't. I mean, I wish I could play you some tracks right now. I mean, this is a great album if you can find it. You can definitely find it as a CD, and the CD is not that bad. It comes in a can. In fact, I've got it right here. You can buy the CD version in this can. This is how it originally was manufactured as an LP. You can see how it just would have rolled off. Would have been impossible to keep these on the shelves. But it comes with some foam, of course, to protect the CDs. You've got a bunch of goodies, outtakes, other versions of the songs, and then you have the mono version of the album, and even some artwork. It unfolds into a bunch of a big poster, and then you've got the stereo version. This is the actual label of the Immediate company that put out the records for Small Faces in the beginning, and some more artwork. So anyway, this is a nice can. This cost $30, and it's not bad for CDs. You know, it's pretty good. Okay, so number 1, my favorite album of all time, such that if I were stuck on a desert island and was told that I could bring one album with me, assuming the island had electricity and a record player, this would be the album that I would select, which is the Rolling Stones' Beggars Banquet. And this is the original cover, which simulates an invitation to RSVP to the banquet. And opens up to a gatefold image of the band at a banquet, ostensibly. And the record came out in London, the London label. And the story behind this was the Stones had already selected a picture of a toilet, a run-down toilet that you might see at a gas station with all kinds of graffiti and writings, telephone numbers, rust all over the toilet, the sink, just a disgusting bathroom. And that's what they wanted for their original cover, but Decca was not crazy about it. And so they refused to put it out with that cover, hence this very simple cover. Which is interesting because right before this came out, the Beatles came out with the White Album. And if you watch interviews of Lennon and McCartney, you'll see them talk about how the Stones aped the Beatles on a lot of their cover work, like Her Majesty's Satanic Request, which came out in '67. You know, looked a lot like Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Then you had this one. I'm trying to think what the other one is. Anyway, that's all I have. This is my top 25, and I hope that was somewhat enjoyable. It was for me. I love sharing stuff about my interests, and I would highly encourage you to shoot a video in response to mine and let me know. Comment your YouTube link so I can take a look at it, and or if you just want to print out the 25 top favorites in a text response in the comment section of my YouTube video, feel free to do so. I'd love to hear from you. So I have other things I'd like to share with you for audiophiles especially. I'm really into cleaning records now. I got this new system. I can share that with you folks. I've learned recently how to set up my cartridge, my stylus, so that it causes the least amount of damage to the grooves of your vinyl, so that you can prolong the life of your records. And I owe that to somebody else that I saw on YouTube, but I have developed kind of my own style of doing it. And so anyway, lots to talk about, lots to share, and for now I'll just say see you later.